Hey folks, it's Eric and Belgrade Beat, and I wanted to talk about the Novaks story. Novaks Djokovic, and yeah, Belgrade Beat on the streets of Thailand. I'm not in Belgrade right now. It's hot and sweaty here. Aren't you jealous? Look at this view. Anyway, so it was released in the last hour or two that Novak Djokovic is going to be deported from Australia, lost his second appeal against his visa cancellation and all that sort of stuff. So I want to comment on that and talk about the two dangerous games that both, separate dangerous games that both, Serbia and Australia are playing in this. And yeah, first of all, let's talk about the whole situation. Yeah, Australia is not a place where I personally would want to be right now, considering that they've had lockdown after lockdown after lockdown after lockdown for the last little while, and very authoritarian tactics to enforce them. I'd rather be in a place like Serbia or Thailand where things are relatively relaxed. There are enough sensible sort of measures in place to keep the coronavirus from spreading everywhere, as there are in a lot of places, Mexico included where I was, and well, whatever. It is what it is. But this thing has gotten really political. And the part that I really don't like about this whole thing is the ugly head of collectivist group identity politics. I'm talking about the whole us versus them sort of narrative that we're seeing from both sides, actually. That we're seeing from the side of Australia with and lots of places in the world where they're talking about us versus them, the vaccinated people versus the unvaccinated people. And this is such a weird sort of politicization of everyday life that me personally, I've decided I'm not going to even talk about my personal vaccination status, because it's nobody's business, and I really want to be neutral in this group battle of us versus them. I'm not going to tell you if I'm us or them, because everybody else seems to be locked into this hysteria of us versus them. And, well, a lot of people, not everybody. And so Australia is playing this us versus them political game. They're politicians, the vaccinated versus the unvaccinated. And they've chosen Novak Djokovic, or as a lot of people are calling him now, Novaks, as a scapegoat for this. And it's very scary because, if you look through history, there's always been a lot of this sort of us versus them sort of maneuvering. And this is how you get things like genocide. This is how you get things like, tribal warfare. This is how you get some of the worst things that can happen ever in humanity. When you mobilize one group of people against another group and demonize the other group and all that sort of stuff. Now, the problem here is that Serbia has chosen to retaliate, maybe not on an institutional level, maybe not from the highest levels of government, but certainly the dialogue in the media is saying that they're striking out against Novak because he's a Serb. And this whole Serbia, the underdog nation sort of narrative comes into play, which, yeah, over history, that was a narrative. Serbs did struggle a lot to maintain their culture, their identity, their language against foreign powers and all that sort of stuff. And this narrative comes up again, when really from the Australian side, they don't care if he's Serbian or Swiss or whatever it is, Surinamese or anything. They just want the dude to be vaccinated. That's the us versus them that they've chosen to make their fucking group identity around, which they're, trying to mobilize the masses of stupid people to believe that they should fight for that. And when you look at these fights, there's always some sort of hypocritical, really selfish political class who care more about their own pocketbooks, their own treasures, and their own power than they care about the actual people. But they always use these sorts of collectivist us versus them narratives to mobilize people to basically do their bidding and destroy the enemy. But when you look at it, it's like almost always like there's people gaining personally from this. It's not about the pride of the nation. It's very rarely about that anymore. It can be, I guess. I mean, if you're looking in Serbian history and the Turks and stuff, for example, or, World War I, I come from an Austrian background, getting rid of the Austrian Empire, like if there was an oppression of Serbian people and identity by someone outside, then it helps to be able to motivate Serbs as a nation to fight against. But I really want to see us go past this. I want to see us go past the us versus them of my nation versus your nation, which is what Serbia is doing now. And I really want to see us go past this us versus them of the unvaccinated versus the vaccinated, or the right versus the left wing in politics and all that sort of stuff. All of this stuff is keeping us from progressing as a human race, right? And you need to understand this. So watch the mechanism of us versus them. Now I have a story that appeared on my Facebook overnight, and this shows an actual, manifestation. I always thought it was great that in Serbia they didn't hold it against me personally, or Americans personally, or British people personally, the bombings of 1999. And I was welcomed as an individual who happens to love Serbia, the Serbian people and the Serbian culture. And sometimes there are some people that you run into in the society that don't actually think like that, and they actually are about the us versus them. Now, I had an Australian friend who was crossing into Serbia last night by land from Hungary, and he got detained for 2.5 hours by the Serbian border police for being Australian. They said, you picked the wrong time to come to Serbia, and they told him they might have to detain him for 10 days while they figure out whether he's allowed to be in the country, so on and so forth. So that's not good to see, because I always thought Serbia was like a little bit better than that. But, it could be just one individual asshole, not the actual Serbian border police that are now following a policy of harassing Australians. It's just one individual person in that police force. But yeah, that happened. And he's a friend of mine, so I got to read about it on Facebook. Anyways, just watch the us versus them narrative and try to judge each and every person as an individual. Don't get caught up in the hysteria of this world. And, I don't have an opinion on the vaccination thing. If somebody gets a vaccine, I hope that works out for them. If somebody doesn't get a vaccine, I hope that works out for them. And if somebody gets COVID, I really hope that works out for them and they manage to heal from the disease. And we're better than this, people. We're better than this us versus them. We are one humanity, and we need to start, not politicizing so much stuff. But we have these people, politicians, who actually make careers based on politicizing issues so they can get reelected, have power, get bribes, and all that sort of stuff. We all know this, and by buying into this us versus them narrative, you're basically just a tool of these types of people who are always individual, looking for their individual gain and profit, number one. So it's Novak Djokovic. He decided not to get vaccinated. He's a great tennis player. Looked like they were going to let him into Australia. Now they're not. Their rules are, I think, pretty outrageous considering the actual situation, and they're politically motivated by a stupid us versus them mentality, and a stupid sort of political class that views it as necessary to, for their own self-preservation, perpetuate this us versus them mentality. And well, don't let yourself get in an us versus them thinking that them doing that is an insult to the Serbian nation, because it has nothing to do with Serbia. It has more to do with their own stupid politics. And, you know, the best way that you can help Serbia, if you want to help the nation of Serbia, is encourage people to do more for their country, build better businesses, provide more value to the world, bring more money in from outside, and make the local economy stronger. That's all I have to say. That's always been my message here on this channel. And yeah, thanks for listening.